So, back during the Wii U and to a lesser extent the 3DS era of Nintendo, if there was one word that was synonymous with Nintendo, it was tone deaf. And yes, that is one word. There's a dash, there's a hyphen in there. But yeah, I remember just constantly the word tone deaf being thrown around in relation to Nintendo back during those days, from like 2011, 12-ish, when the Wii U was first unveiled and released through its whole lifespan, which pretty much ended in 2016. It technically still got Breath of the Wild in 2017, but no one was playing it on their Wii U. So yeah, effectively that console lasted from 2012 to 2016, and some people look back at it with rose tinted glasses. I, however, am not one of them. I remember very vividly back during those days, it was honestly kind of embarrassing to be a Nintendo fan. You know, it wasn't really something that I wanted to admit to people, like at school and places like that. Whereas now I don't really have that same level of shame attached to my hobby as a Nintendo fan. Now, some of that sure can be attributed to the fact that I've just grown over time and matured and realized that, who cares? People like what they like. But a big portion of it too is that Nintendo just wasn't in the same place in the cultural zeitgeist or whatever that it is today. You just look at the games that were coming out and just the advertisements, the way they were marketing the games, and it was just cringe. it was subpar. Not everything. There were some good games on the Wii U. Emphasis on some. Most of which I would say like 90% of which have been ported over to the Switch, so there's no really real reason to go back to the Wii U at this point. But yeah, it was a pretty dire time. I think the most egregious example is probably E3 2015. Was pretty infamous for Nintendo just announcing a bunch of games that nobody wanted. Like one of the biggest offenders was Metroid Prime Federation Force, which, at that point, I don't know how long it had been at that time, if it was 10 years or longer or what, since the last Metroid Prime game. People were hungry for a new one. There really hadn't been Metroid anything in a very, very long time. And then they give us this weird spin off with like chibi proportioned characters, and it's not really a Metroidvania. And it's like this level based mission system with like an emphasis on local and online multiplayer. So nobody was happy about that. People were extremely upset. The game did not sell well at all. Then, you also had stuff like, I think at the same E3, they announced Mario Tennis Ultra Smash, which is probably the biggest ripoff of any Nintendo game. That's a $60 game. It's a tennis game where you only have one court to play on. In past Mario Kart games, you can change up, from all these different courts and stuff. No, just one, just one arena. Incredibly rushed game. I can't imagine that it took them any longer than maybe like 3 months to make that game or something. And then it's got this dumb gimmick where you just grab mega mushrooms that are arbitrarily thrown onto the court, and then you're overpowered, and then you're going to get the next point, and then the next player gets tossed a mega mushroom, and then they get the next point. So it's like there's really not a whole lot of strategy or anything there. And yeah, it feels like a prototype that was made in like a couple of months, honestly. Then you had Star Fox Zero was officially unveiled that year, and it was kind of teased at the E3 before that. And people were really excited, finally be getting a new Star Fox game after all this time. And the game came out, and a lot of people complained about the graphics, said it looked kind of like a GameCube game. I thought the game looked fine. I didn't really have a lot of complaints as far as the graphics goes. And then people also, the biggest complaint the game got was the control scheme, because like Nintendo just tried so hard to like make the Wii U gamepad relevant when a lot of games just would have been better off without it. So it's like, you would have one view on the TV, and then you'd have the cockpit view on the gamepad, and you'd have to constantly like switch your view between like the screen in your hands to the TV, and it was cumbersome for a lot of people. For me personally, I didn't mind that too bad. But what I really didn't like about Star Fox Zero, kind of like with Mario Tennis Ultra Smash, is just a lack of content. I mean, it's a $60 game that you're buying in this modern era that you can beat in like 2 hours or less. It's about the same length as Star Fox 64. Um, so that's really lame, I thought. Like, because I'm not the type of person, like, yeah, there's replayability there, but I'm not really super interested in, like, score chasing. Personally, if Nintendo makes a new Star Fox, I'd like to see something different and not just like a on rails, linear arcade style shooter, because I just find that kind of archaic and I just don't really find it that compelling to go back and play these levels again and again and again and optimize my strategy to get the most points. That's just not that fun for me personally. And I know the game came with that like Slippy mode or whatever, like that. There was like an extra disc in the box. It was like Star Fox Guard or whatever. I'll be honest, I never touched that. That's still probably in plastic. I don't know, but it's never been put into my Wii U. I can tell you that. And then beyond that, you had stuff like Um, oh yeah, at that E3 there was also, how could we forget Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival? Oh boy, another game that was not worth $60. Like you can really tell Nintendo was desperate at that time, because like they wanted to have something out, for the holidays and stuff to keep the momentum up on the system, and that way people wouldn't complain that they didn't have any games to play, and that way they could also kind of recuperate some of those lost sales, just like put out these easy games that reuse some assets, from previous games or whatever, but they weren't good. um, yeah, Amiibo Festival was basically Mario Party, but without the mini games. So it's just a board, and there's like no strategy whatsoever. It's pretty much just 100% luck, from what I've seen of it. I never played it, um, but but yeah, that was all just at that one E3. It was just disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. And then like a month later, Satoru Iwata, Nintendo's president, sadly passed away from cancer. So that was just a real, like, Nintendo was in a very rough shape at that point. And I remember at the time, especially after Iwata died, just feeling so scared for the company of like, well, what do we do now? And Nintendo's kind of talked about they were pretty sidelined by his passing too, and really weren't prepared, didn't have like a anyone in mind really for to take the leadership position. So it was a really rough time for Nintendo, and this was a several year problem. 2015 was kind of the worst of it, but if you go back further, like in 2012, the year the Wii U came out, that was the year, we also got Paper Mario Sticker Star, which was, just, I did a whole video talking about that. You can check that out if you want to see it, where I recently played Paper Mario the Origami King for the first time, and I talk about how it was better than I thought it would be. But Sticker Star, man, just kind of abandoned everything that Paper Mario was known for. Kind of like the same thing that Metroid Prime Federation Force did, where it just kind of pulled the rug right out from under you of what you expect and enjoy about these games to give what's frankly a subpar product. And then, a few years later in like 2016, they announced Paper Mario Color Splash, which I haven't played. And like, honestly, it's probably a decent game. Honestly, I feel like Metroid Prime Federation Force might actually be a decent game. I wouldn't know. I've not ever really had a big enough group of people to play it with because nobody else bought the game. But, unfortunately, it was just games that came out, at the wrong place and the wrong time. That just wasn't what people were wanting. You announced this new Paper Mario game, and it looks to be a direct sequel on the surface to Sticker Star, which was like unanimously hated. And so there was just so many missteps with the Wii U. Again, there were some good games on the console. Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze, phenomenal. Mario Kart 8 was good, but, they completely neutered the battle mode, so that was kind of unfortunate. And then, Smash Brothers was cool, but, there was also the 3DS version, which I kind of preferred to the Wii U version. So the Wii U, it was not a great console, regardless of what people say. I'm sorry, but I think that's rose-tinted glasses. As someone who lived through it, it was not the best time to be a Nintendo fan. The third parties weren't there. And, this isn't even just a problem exclusively for Nintendo. I think even third parties, but even going beyond that, I could do a whole video talking about this. But I really think that during, like, kind of the early, mid 2010s, uh, just entertainment in all forms of media was just not good at that time. Just like the movies that were coming out and the TV shows, the video games. But I think that we really saw a resurgence, kind of like in the latter half, like in kind of around 2017 onward, with all those. Really, I guess people screaming into the void on Twitter actually gets the job done. I don't know. But I feel like a lot of these companies that were very tone deaf, not just Nintendo, have really um, done a 180 in a lot of ways. And that's not to say that we're living in a perfect world. There's still things here and there that's like, maybe you'll find out about like a game you were really looking forward to that got canceled, or like, oh, this game, was ruined by microtransactions. It could have been great if they hadn't made it free to play, like multiverses or something. You've got some people that'll complain like that video games just suck nowadays because everything has to have a day one patch and everything has, it's a live service and they monopolize the crap out of it with loot boxes and, microtransactions and season passes and all this stuff. But if you feel that way, I really do think, well, you're just not playing enough games. Because personally, I think, at least up to this point, this could very well change with Switch 2. We're a couple days away from the Switch 2 coming out, which is why I'm doing this video now. But I really think that Switch 1 era Nintendo has been peak gaming. This has been the most enjoyable time I've ever had as a gamer in my life. And nostalgia is a very powerful thing. Like, I look back at a lot of my favorite childhood games and I loved them so much. But even that, even as a cynical adult who's lost his innocence and has been hardened by the world, I'm still like, no, this is a really, really good time to be a gamer. Again, that might change with the Switch 2 because Nintendo's kind of, they're not full on embracing, microtransactions and all that, but, we're getting $80 games here for Mario Kart World, and I'm still kind of iffy on how I feel about the game, if there's really going to be enough content there to justify the price, if we've already seen everything that game has to offer, feeling like the open world's not big enough, yada yada. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to reminisce about the Nintendo Switch 1. So yeah, for this podcast, I thought it would be fun to just recollect on just the most hype-inducing Switch 1 moments, at least for me personally, that really just were pie in the sky, pipe dream things that I didn't necessarily expect to happen, but I wanted so desperately and waited and fantasized about for years. Because we got so much of that on the Switch. It's really astounding just how drastically Nintendo was able to course correct from the disaster of the Wii U to give us the best game software lineup ever from both first party, third party. It was just phenomenal. So let's talk about that. So I've made a whole list here that I've got down in front of me of just different, I guess we'll say periods. It's hard to pinpoint, like it's not exactly one specific moment, but most of these are just a culmination of things that just got me so hyped and so excited whenever they were announced or whatever. So let's get on to it. Starting with, and again, this is why I say it's not really tied to just like a specific moment or event. It's more broad than that. So the first thing we have on the list is the resurgence of Mario RPGs. Now, this is actually one of the most recent ones on this list. Because the ball only really got rolling on this in like 2023. I believe it was June of 2023. We got our Nintendo Direct. E3, I think, was already dead by that point, but it was effectively Nintendo's E3 Direct. And that was a really good one, particularly if you were a Mario fan like I am. They started off, early on, they announced, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, and they announced Princess Peach was going to be getting her own game, which I don't think had a title at that point. And then there was something else Mario at the start of it. It might have been Mario versus Donkey Kong that got a remake, which honestly I thought was pretty good. But yeah, then like halfway through the presentation, oh, they also ended that one with Super Mario Brothers Wonder, by the way. So that was just Mario out the wazoo, or should I say Mario out the wahoo? Sorry, but anyway. yeah, like right smack dab in the middle of the direct, they dropped a massive bombshell and announced that this did not leak at all, as far as I know. Well, actually, I take that back. I think maybe like literally like one day, like 24 hours before it, I think maybe like Papa Gino's and a couple other people might have been like tipped off that it was happening. But still, though, what a bombshell announcement! Just a full, beautiful, ground up remake of Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, although they dropped the subtitle for whatever reason. Looked great. I mean, it looked perfect. I don't know what more you could want from a remake, unless if you wanted to do something different where it's not the same like isometric angle and where it's actually like, you've got a proper, like, fully controllable camera in a 3D space or whatever. But for what it is, I mean, it's perfect, I think. The models all look incredibly faithful. You know, they had to cut out a Bruce Lee reference here and there, but on the whole, I mean, like the same game's integrity was maintained. You had a really good remixed soundtrack by the original composer Yoko Shimomura, and then you also had the original one there you could switch to. Then they added a little bit of extra content, some extra hard like boss rematches that you can do and stuff. So it was really, really cool. And I say that as someone who's not even the biggest Super Mario RPG fan. I'd never actually beaten the game before it came to Switch. The announcement got me so excited because it's like, oh my god, Mario RPGs are back. That basically confirmed to me like, oh, that must mean maybe a few years from now, Nintendo's going to give us a remake of Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, which is my personal favorite game of all time. Little did I know that just a few months later, in the next Nintendo Direct, they would announce the remake of Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. Uh, like my mouth was agape. I wasn't doing YouTube at that point. I don't think. No, no, I wasn't. But I was looking at the TV like this. I was just like I remember for a good few seconds, I was just because like as soon as it started, I was like, I know exactly what this is. They show that book with the star on it and the da na 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 da na 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 da. I was like, oh my god, it's Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. Because man, again, back just Nintendo being tone deaf in the Wii U 3DS days, Nintendo had completely neutered the Mario RPG. I can't even say series because there were multiple series, and they just gutted all of them at that point. Where you still had the Mario and Luigi games, but they had kind of become a shell of their former selves. I combined shell and self and said shelf. But anyway, because it was like Nintendo had these weird Mario mandates where it's like you're not allowed to have original characters anymore, and everything has to be sterile and vanilla and basic. And that's why instead of really cool bosses like, Lord Crump and Grotus and Fawful and Dementio and Count Bleck and all these other cool people, Cacletta and Tasma from previous Mario RPGs. It was just like, yeah, in this game, the bosses they're called the Legion of Stationery, and it's just office supplies. It's like Nintendo's like SpongeBob's grandma. Here's some office supplies. I didn't wrap them. I knew you wouldn't mind. And you're literally just battling just a talking pair of scissors, no face or anything, and like you're fighting a box of colored pencils. But no, finally the Mario mandates were over. And that was just so awesome to see. And again, that was really compounded by the end of the presentation where they announced Super Mario Brothers Wonder. Because the Mario mandates really impacted all of Mario's franchises. People were so sick of like the formulaic new Super Mario Brothers games that just came out, one after another after another. And people were getting so fatigued of that because they were all the same. They reused a lot of the same music, same assets, and like character models, and a lot of the same power up. They'd introduce like one new power up, and it's like that's the big new gimmick of the whole game is just this one power up. Like wow, this game's big new selling point is we've got the flying squirrel. The flying squirrel suit. It's like okay, like 30 years before this, you gave us the raccoon suit. This is kind of just another version of that, but not quite as good. um, So it was just a really weird time. But yeah, with Super Mario Brothers Wonder, is the Mario franchise getting all ambitious and exciting and weird again. Even years before that, with Mario Odyssey, And I think a lot of other people thought that was the big turning point because that game had a lot of weird NPCs. You had the fork people or whatever in the Luncheon Kingdom, and then in Toast Arena you had the little maraca guys with the poncho and the sombreros, and they've got like their face looks like one of those like Mexican like sugar skulls or whatever for like Day of the Dead. So that was really cool to see. But outside of Mario Odyssey, not a lot of the other Mario games were really doing that again until 2023. It just felt like they finally broke the mold, and it was like, okay, everything is free game again, finally, after all these years. I don't know why it took so long. But yeah, we got Super Mario RPG, and then Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. And then to top it all off, they announced not a remake, but a brand new Mario and Luigi game in the following Nintendo Direct. That's 3 Mario RPGs announced in the span of less than a year. Now, was that great for sales? Probably not. I don't know if that was the best business decision on Nintendo's part, but I was excited as a fan. I was happy they did. It's kind of like, well, that's kind of another thing we'll get into later, but Microsoft going multi-platform and putting their games out on Switch, it's like, thank you. I love you for this. I don't know why you're doing it. I feel like it's maybe, not having exclusives on your Xbox anymore just kind of is de-incentivizing people from buying an Xbox. So I feel like this is hurting your business, but as a consumer, I'm very happy about it. Thank you. um, and so that was the case with Mario and Luigi Brothers Ship. The game came out. Admittedly, I did not love it. I thought the game was a little mediocre, but they tried. It. I still am really happy that that game exists, and I appreciate that it exists. um, so, um, so yeah, I'm just really happy that Mario RPGs seem to be back in full force. Because there was a lot of discussion. I remember listening to some like Kit and Krista podcasts about like the future of Mario RPGs back before any of these were announced. And they were saying like, well, maybe Nintendo's just gonna, because before Paper Mario was the console Mario RPGs, and then Mario and Luigi was the handheld Mario RPGs. But now that the Switch is a handheld console hybrid, maybe they're just gonna kill off one of those. Maybe the Mario and Luigi series is just dead. Very happy that that didn't happen, and Nintendo has seemingly shown that they're okay now with all 3 of these franchises coexisting. Because at one point that was their rationale. I remember like the director of Paper Mario Color Splash, when asked about why Paper Mario wasn't an RPG anymore, they were like, oh, well, we've already got a Mario RPG series, and that's Mario and Luigi. If you want that traditional turn-based combat with leveling up and all that, play those instead, which I thought was kind of a bullcrap reason, especially since Paper Mario came first. But yeah, so that was just so exciting, and I'm so excited for the future because like I have to imagine that now that Thousand Year Door's out, that Intelligent Systems probably immediately started working on the next Paper Mario game, which we'll probably see here in the next few years, maybe in like 2027 or something, we'll get the first, like a proper Thousand Year Door sequel, and that's just so exciting. So yeah, that was number 1 on my list, the resurgence of Mario RPGs, and just breathing fresh new life into the Mario series in general. So great to see. We talked about with the platformers, how ambitious Mario Odyssey was, even though I'm not the biggest Odyssey fan, but kind of like with Mario and Luigi Brothers Ship, I can still appreciate it, though. I am one of those people who's kind of like, oh, there's too many moons, but still, though, the game wasn't afraid to be quirky and weird and different, so I really respect it for that. Bowser's Fury, I thought was phenomenal. Mario Odyssey might have disappointed me a little bit, but Bowser's Fury was the sandbox style Mario 64 sequel that I've wanted for so many years. So that's the thing with every misstep on the Switch, even though most people wouldn't consider Mario Odyssey a misstep. But it's like they would come out with something a few years later, essentially, that more than made up for it. So it's like you're not going to hear me complain about Mario Odyssey because Nintendo gave me another great 3D platformer Mario game on Switch this generation. It was kind of short, but that makes for a lot of replayability and stuff. But it was so good. And so that's got me really excited about the future of 3D Mario, but even just all the other Mario spin-offs. We've talked about the RPGs, but another very 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 big one, Mario Party. That's another franchise where Nintendo, tone deaf Nintendo, in the Wii U 3DS days just completely massacred my boy. They did this dumb car mechanic, where you were just going in a linear path and like you were all in the same car together, and so it was almost entirely luck based. Really weird and nonsensical. Um, but they finally, they said, let's make Mario Party great again, and gave us just some really banger games. First was Super Mario Party, which kind of had mixed reception. Personally, I enjoyed it. There were some elements of the gameplay that were a little bit bullcrap. If you got, if you happen to get lucky with the allies, then you were almost guaranteed to win because they added to your role. Plus, they helped you in mini games, so it made you really overpowered. Plus, like whoever is in front of the pack and gets the first star, you're pretty much going to get the rest of the stars because it's like they would keep just putting the stars like in front of each other. So like, if you missed out on one star, there was kind of a low chance that the next one would spawn closer to you. It was probably just going to be a little bit further out from the person who already got it. So that kind of sucked. And there was kind of a lack of content. There was only like 4 boards. Everybody thought the game would get DLC, but it didn't. But what was there, I did like it. Some people were not a fan of this game, but again, Nintendo, a few years later, any game that came out on the Switch for the most part that didn't hit, they would come out with a replacement essentially a few years later that's like, okay, we got no reason to complain anymore, because then they came out with Mario Party Superstars, and that might be my favorite Mario Party game. I don't know. Up to that point, I loved Mario Party 6, and I also really, really loved Mario Party DS, actually. I don't think enough people played that game or talk about it because where it's handheld makes it a little bit not as inducive to, a party setting because everybody has to have their own system and everything. Um, but Mario Party Superstars is basically what Mario Party the Top 100 should have been. And because they already did Mario Party the Top 100 on 3DS, I think a lot of people thought Nintendo would never do that again, because it's like Nintendo's not a company that's known for like revisiting old ideas. Because what sucked about it is, they had a compilation on 3DS. It was 100 of what's supposed to be the best quote unquote Mario Party mini games, but there was only one board. So it was like, you got to be kidding me. And it wasn't that classic style that everybody loved, where you go around the board and you've got all these alternate paths, and you buy a star for 20 coins, and there's item shops along the way. You get items, screw over your friends. It wasn't like that. It was. It also wasn't in the car either. It was like this weird kind of like grid-based system, which I've since gone back and played, and that's actually not bad. Those are the 3DS Mario Party games are kind of fun, but still only one board. That sucks. So yeah, that game didn't have a lot of longevity. But then they come out with Mario Party Superstars in like 2021 on the Switch, and that game has 100 of what Nintendo considers the best mini games. But I would say it was a better selection than what the Top 100 had. I would say like 90 of the 100 games, like 90%, were hits. There was only maybe like 10 mini games that were misses. Like I hate the Rocky Horse back and forth rate, the Derby race. That one's stupid. I don't like the one where you're hitting the fruit block or whatever under the or you're hitting the block under the fruit tree, and like you gotta like avoid the bees. That one kind of sucks. The Piranha Plant 1 versus 3 one, where you're one person skateboarding away from PD Piranha. That one person's gonna win like every single time. So there's a few stinkers in there, but like 90%, like when I was in school, 90 out of 100, that's still an A. So like the vast majority of the mini games were really, really solid. But on top of that, you actually had normal boards. They had 5 boards from previous Mario Party games, 2 from the first game on N64, and then 2 from Mario Party 2, and then 1 board from Mario Party 3. And it was just a great game. I really enjoyed it. Some people say the economy is a little too broken in that game, and I can kind of see that. But it was such a good game. Looked great, and they added online play. That's a big thing people have been wanting for years and years and years, and they finally did it, and it was actually really good. And then after that, a few years after that, they had Super Mario Party Jamboree, which was essentially, just a brand new Mario Party game that was more of what people loved from the classics. And that one had 7 boards. I think I still preferred Super Mario or Mario Party Superstars over Jamboree though. So even though it had more boards, and I would argue maybe even better boards, a lot of the mini games were relegated to those like these different side modes and stuff. Like these ones can only be used with with motion controls, and these ones are for the Coupathlon mode, and these ones are like this rhythm thing. So even though they boasted like more mini games than any Mario Party game in series history, with like 120 or whatever, when you were actually playing the main Mario Party mode, you would get a lot of repeats of mini games. So that kind of took away from the enjoyment, because it would get kind of repetitive after a while, because so many of those mini games weren't showing up in the rotation because you can only play them in one of these other lesser modes. That's kind of a fun novelty to try once, and then it's like, yeah, I don't really need to go back to this. But still, though, a really, really good platform for Mario Party games. So that's great. So yeah, I think that's enough about Mario. Let's move on to another item. That's the first of my bullet points, of which I have like probably 10 or more, and we're already like 30 minutes into this podcast. And actually, we're not done with Mario, because the second item I have on here is the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass. I was so floored when they announced this. I was so excited. That was, I want to say it was like maybe their February Direct of 2021, maybe. Might have been 2022. Maybe it was 2022. Um, but yeah, I was so excited. That's what I'd been wanting for years. Admittedly, Mario Kart 8, it was. I really enjoyed it on Wii U. Again, the battle mode kind of sucked. I was honestly pretty salty. I remember when they first announced that Mario Kart 8 was just going to get ported over to the Switch as a deluxe game. I was like, you mean I gotta buy the same game again for $60? I was very salty about that early on in the Switch generation's life. Just all these ports that we were getting for full price, and it's like, well, I get that the system uses cartridges instead of discs, because where it's a handheld format. So obviously I can't just I get why it's not backwards compatible, but like, if I have some way to verify with my Nintendo, online account, can I not like maybe get like a steep discount where I can upgrade for like $20 or something? I don't know, but so it kind of sucked. It felt kind of like a just a punch in the gut for those of us who had supported Nintendo through through the Wii U era, that we would have to buy those same games over again. Because sometimes that would be like the game for that month. Nintendo did really good during the Switch lifespan of having a new game come out pretty much every month. But there would be kind of gaps here and there if like the game coming out that month is like, oh, that's a game I already had on Wii U. So if you weren't that interested in picking it up again, then you're kind of twiddling your thumbs a little bit maybe about what you're going to play. At least first party wise, but third parties still really delivered on Switch, and again we'll get more into that later. Um, but yeah, so I was really excited about the battle mode, especially when they announced later on like, oh, they're bringing back like Shine Thief and Coin Runners, and like introducing this new mode, Renegade Roundup, which I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of that one. But yeah, it was just really exciting to see that they were actually giving us a decent battle mode. I was still salty. I did end up still buying the game for $60, and I thought like, okay, if Nintendo, if they plan to support this game throughout the whole Switch generation and give us a bunch of DLC, then I guess I can be forgiven, because at that point it's basically a new game. But then that never happened, and it seemed like it was never going to happen until finally 2022 or whenever it was, they announced the Booster Course Pass, and I was so elated. Finally, some new tracks that I can race on in Mario Kart, because I was so burnt out on Mario Kart 8 Deluxe at that point. I'd sunk like 200 hours of that game into that game on the Wii U, and then the Switch version came, and I sunk probably another 200 hours into that. So I was just sick of the same tracks, but they finally delivered and announced they were going to be doubling the content of the game with 48 new tracks, bringing it to a total of 96, which is insane. And some of the early tracks, like in the first wave and stuff, the graphics could have been better. But it was a steal, though. It was like $20 for all that new content and free if you had the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pass. So it was awesome. It was basically Smash Brothers Ultimate all over again because Smash Ultimate, and that's the next item on the list. Spoilers, we'll get to that here in a second. But it was always so exciting with every Smash game, with just like every Nintendo Direct, like who's going to be the new character that they announce. And I remember after Sora, was the last Smash Ultimate DLC character. I remember thinking like, man, Nintendo's really got some big shoes to fill here. Like, what are they going to do for these Nintendo Directs to make up for that lost hype of there not being Smash Brothers anymore? What are they going to be able to do that can break the internet the way that announcing Steve for Minecraft being in Smash Brothers did, or like Sans from Undertale getting a Mii costume? And lo and behold, finally, it was several years later than it should have been, in my opinion. Although we kind of now know why, thanks to some interviews about the development of Mario Kart World and how that started pretty much immediately after Mario Kart 8 Deluxe launched. But anyway, but they finally did it, and one of the very first tracks they showed off was my personal favorite track in Mario Kart history, Coconut Mall. It's like, oh my god, we're getting Coconut Mall finally in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And yeah, every wave just brought so much excitement. We got Maple Treeway. That's my second favorite Mario Kart track. Honestly, though, I say Coconut Mall and Maple Treeway are my two favorite Mario Kart tracks, but they might have been dethroned, actually. Ninja Hideaway is incredible. I loved that one. That was also in the first wave. But then so many others they brought back, some of them that I wasn't even that big of a fan of before. Like, I wasn't a big fan of Choco Mountain, really. It was kind of whatever. And like Shroom Ridge from the DS was kind of whatever. But I really love them in 8 Deluxe. They're really, really great tracks. And then so much more on top of that. We got Boo Lake. That was a really cool one. We got Squeaky Clean Sprint. That was a neat premise. I already really loved kind of the whole like Andy's room sort of thing with a child's bedroom with all these toys and stuff that we got with Ribbon Road. So now I have this one that's like in a bathroom. That's just a lot of fun. I really like that. And yeah, just so many. You had the Real World City tracks from the mobile game Mario Kart Tour, and some of those could be kind of hit or miss. Some of them I genuinely love. I think that the Rome Avanti one, fantastic. That's like an A tier track for me. The Athens Greece one, that's like really up there. That's like a B tier track for me. And I think I'm forgetting at least one other that I'm like, that's a really. Oh yeah, the New York one. It has like the big like Donkey Kong projection of like the old arcade game. That one's incredible. Which reminds me, with all these new characters or all these new tracks, they also added new characters that people have been wanting. Kamek was my number one. So he was supposed to be in Mario Kart back on the Nintendo 64 in the beta version, and they cut him in favor of, it was either Wario or Donkey Kong. I can't remember which one they replaced him with. So to finally get Kamek after all these years, I was so excited. I'm really mad that he's relegated now to just being an item in Mario Kart World. They gave me my boy just to snatch him away from me. How could they do that? But that was cool to see. And then like Pauline, Funky Kong, Diddy Kong, Birdo, Wiggler. I'm not the biggest Wiggler. And then like Peachette. That one's kind of stupid, but whatever. Not going to complain too much. So by the end of it, because I remember back on the Wii U, people were like, man, the roster in this game sucks. But they really added a lot of characters and stuff to the point where like just all this content between the characters and the stages and having, the revamped battle mode from, the Wii U version to now. I do wish we had gotten more battle tracks, added with the Booster Course Pass. We didn't, but that's okay. Some new car customization parts could have been nice too, like because Tor had like a billion and a bunch of different character skins. We didn't get that, but that's okay. I'm still very, very happy with what we got. And it took Mario Kart 8 Deluxe from being a game I was really miffed about it just being a port to being what I think is the definitive Mario Kart game. And I really don't know if Mario Kart World is going to be able to surpass that. I hope I'm wrong about that, but I don't know. But yeah, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with the Booster Course Pass, so good. Um, so yeah, moving on. Smash Brothers Ultimate. Da 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 da. Da, 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 da. When they dropped that "Everyone Is Here" trailer, well, I guess I should go back before that. We got the tease in the, I think it was the March 2018 Nintendo Direct. One of my favorite Nintendo Directs of all time, by the way. They started off with like 3DS games, I remember, and even that was really mind blowing because they announced we were getting a new WarioWare game, WarioWare Gold, which I think is the best WarioWare game. It's just an amazing culmination of all the previous games. It's got like 300 micro games in there. A lot of them are old, but there's a handful of new ones in there, and the new ones are really, really great. So many cool control schemes where it's got the motion controls and it's got the stylus and then the button presses and then all this other side content from previous WarioWare games. Such a good compilation. They also announced Luigi's Mansion was coming to 3DS with like a two-player co-op mode. Did they announce the co-op? They might not have announced that at the time, but at the very least that the game was getting ported to 3DS, which was like, huh? So yeah, on the 3DS side of things, I thought that was pretty cool already. And then they dropped some bombshells during the actual meat and potatoes where they got into the Switch games. They announced all kinds of really, really cool third party games coming to Switch. They announced a couple of them I didn't care for at the time, like Okami and Little Nightmares. I was like, okay, sure, whatever. I hadn't actually played those games. I've since played them, and I'm like, oh my god, these games are amazing. If I had known how good they were, I would have been popping off back then. And then they announced, Undertale coming to Switch, which was a really, really big deal. But then they also announced the Crash Bandicoot Insane trilogy. That's the one where I was like losing my mind about. Then they announced the Octo expansion for Splatoon 2, and then they ended it. I remember distinctly. I felt like I was going to pass out. I was like, I don't think I can take any more of this because the Nintendo Direct had already given me so much, and then it was like, oh my god, this is a Smash trailer, and they dropped that logo, which the Smash Brothers for Wii U 3DS logo had like these like red and blue flames and stuff. This one was much more simplistic. This one was just kind of just a black stamp essentially, and it was very evocative of Melee. And it was like, oh my god, because a lot of people consider Melee to be the pinnacle of Smash Brothers. I'm not like a super competitive player, so I don't necessarily feel that way. But Melee was my first Smash Brothers game, so I have a lot of nostalgia for it. So I was so excited. And then, as we got closer to launch, at that E3, honestly, that was a very bad E3 presentation because Smash Brothers kind of carried it. There was literally like nothing else. They started it with Damon X Machina, which like nobody played, and that really set the tone for the whole rest of the presentation. It was like, man, but we did get Smash Brothers Ultimate in there, probably like 20 minutes of it. But man, they give us that "Everyone Is Here" trailer. We see, the inklings from Splatoon in there, which we already knew from the teaser. But then, they also announced, that they were doing this whole Echo Fighters thing, and we got Daisy. Um, they announced the big bombshell that all the previous characters from every Smash Brothers game were back. No cuts this time. They brought back Solid Snake. They brought back all these other characters. They showed off stages that I had always wanted to see come back, just remastered and looking beautiful in HD. Again, I have so much nostalgia for Melee. So seeing, actually, I don't think they showed Fountain of Dreams in this presentation. But when I saw Fountain of Dreams, I think that might have been like maybe like in August. I think they had another Nintendo Direct. That's where they announced King K. Rool and also Simon Belmont, which I'm not really a Castlevania guy, but K. Rool was like my number one, at least as far as first party characters, the one that I wanted the most. So I was so excited to see him. His reveal was so awesome. They did that fake out. And the music, the remixed Gangplank Galleon was so good. Oh, I was so excited about King K. Rool. And when the game came out and I actually played him, I resonated with his moveset, so that was pretty cool. Because a lot of times with Smash Brothers, like Pac-Man, Pac-Man was like my number one character. That was one good thing that came from the Wii U days. Nintendo might have been tone deaf every other way, but man, Pac-Man was my number one most wanted character, and so that E3 2014 when they announced him, I was so over the moon. It's so funny. I remember distinctly. This is kind of going on a side tangent because now we're not talking about Switch. We're talking about Wii U. Um, but I remember for E3 that year, Nintendo I think was going to have like 3 days of E3 press coverage. And the first day they had their digital event where they had like the robot chicken stuff, and they had some really cool announcements. They announced the first Splatoon game, Mario Maker. I think they might have announced a Smash Brothers character. It might have been like Palutena or somebody. But then later that afternoon, they were going to have like a developer roundtable live thing with Sakurai, and that's where they announced Pac-Man. But I remember we had a power outage, and our power was out for like over 24 hours. I got to see the digital event live, so I was very glad to have seen that. But we lost power. It might have been closer to 48 hours. It was like, I think the longest we'd ever been without power. I don't remember what happened or why. And I didn't have like a phone at that time and stuff, so I had no internet. We didn't have like 4G or anything, um, so I just had no internet. And then like when the power came back on, I immediately go to YouTube to see what I've missed, and like the first thing I see is Pac-Man's smiling face doing and it was his classic design, not that crappy one they had, like the Ghostly Adventures design. But anyway, oh my god, I was so excited. But yeah, King K. Rool, he was like after Pac-Man, he was like my next, at least as far as reasonable predictions, because like I knew like, well, Crash Bandicoot and Spyro weren't going to be likely. It's kind of different now though. That can actually happen, I think, with now that Microsoft's acquired them and Microsoft's being so buddy buddy with Nintendo. What a weird world. We're living in such a weird timeline. But anyway, um, but yeah, so it was just so exciting. All the character reveals. It was like Nintendo was just going down the list of like most recommended characters. It was like, okay, we got Sora, check. Ridley, check. King K. Rool, check. Inklings, check. Minecraft, check. Sans, check. It was just so awesome. They even put in like with the Echo Fighters, they put Crom in there, who I know from like the Smash Giga Leak or whatever back on was it the Famitsu leak or whatever from the Wii U game, because I guess he was planned and then was cut. They finally put him in there, and they put like Dark Samus, all these characters that people have been wanting for years and years. Banjo Kazooie, excuse me, somehow almost forgot that one. The hero from Dragon Quest. At the time, I'd never played Dragon Quest, so when Hero was announced, I was like, okay, whatever. But then I played Dragon Quest 11, which was my first Dragon Quest game. Absolutely loved it. So now I'm like, yeah, Hero, yeah. Although I don't play as him much because his moveset's kind of weird. But that was still really, really cool to see. Um, yeah, you had Rex, or well, I guess it was like Pyra and Mithra or whatever. I'm not really much of a Xenoblade guy. You had Min Min from ARMS, kind of neat. I was never really the biggest ARMS fan. See, not every character in that lineup was for me, but still, it was just so exciting. Like every time they would announce a new character and you get a new stage. And, the base game had like 100 stages. Like they brought back almost every stage from previous Smash Brothers games, with a few exceptions. Um, like I was really upset that they didn't bring back the 3DS Rainbow Road stage. That was Rainbow Road. That was like one of my favorite Smash Brothers stages of all time. Also on 3DS, the Pac Maze stage, which is way better than that Pac Land one, which looks like something out of Microsoft Paint. And then Pokey Floats, they didn't bring that one back. But outside of those few, pretty much all. I remember when I saw Fourside. I know that's probably not a very popular stage because it's not really good for competitive playing, and like Ness can't recover on it at all. But that's like one of the first stages you unlock back in Melee. So when I first saw that like it was going to be in, it was remade in the new Smash Brothers game, I audibly gasped, and I don't do that very often at all. But I was like, yeah, I was so excited. They did what I wanted them to do for Smash Brothers on Switch, which was essentially combine all the content from the Wii U and the 3DS games and just add on top of that, and they did that. So it was just fantastic. Really, really great. A couple things they could, I guess, improve from here. If they want to just keep one upping what they've got with the next game. If they bring back Smash Run from the 3DS, and then also maybe give us like a proper story mode again, like the Subspace Emissary with like cutscenes and all that. And again, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, and also Rayman. That trifecta, if you give them to me, Sakurai, I will love you forever. I will never ask you for anything ever again. Um, but yeah, so that was extremely exciting. And then the next item that I have on my list, we've got Miracle third party ports. I talked about this a little bit already, but we're going to dive a lot deeper into that. Usually when people say Miracle ports that came to Switch, they're talking about games like Doom and Wolfenstein and Witcher 3, games that it's like, I don't understand how they got this to run on the hardware, because, this should only be possible on, PlayStation or Xbox or whatever. That's not what I'm referring to necessarily, because I really don't play a lot of like mature games. So those games like Doom and Wolfenstein and stuff aren't really the types of games that I play personally. But for me, what I consider Miracle third party ports are games that I never in a million years would have thought would have come to Switch, either for obscurity or because of licensing, or something like that. We'll go down the list here. Like, if I had told you all the games that I wish would come to Switch back in like 2017, and then fast forward to now, you would think I was like a psychic or something. Because like I've got basically everything that I wanted. Like I feel like I've got some kind of, like I feel like I can just I now, thanks to the Switch, I'm suffering from some kind of delirium of overinflated delusions of grandeur, in thinking that I can just will things into existence, that if I want it bad enough I can physically manifest it, because like everything I've wanted to come to Switch more or less has come to Switch. So let's go down through the line of these, and I'll tell you all the reasons I didn't think they were going to happen. Crash Insane Trilogy and also the Spyro Reignited Trilogy. We'll just cover both of those at the same time. Um, they were owned by Activision, and Activision is a third party company, and they've had other Crash and Spyro games come to Nintendo platforms before, like on the Wii. There was Crash of the Titans and Mind Over Mutant, which neither of which were very good games. And then like Spyro, I think they were doing like, was it the Legend of Spyro games? And then even before that, they went third party, and they were getting games by like Traveler's Tales, and those would come to like GameCube and stuff. But it really seemed like, at least I thought anyway, like I never saw any hints that Crash Insane Trilogy was just a timed exclusive for PlayStation. It really seemed like Activision had made a permanent exclusivity deal with Sony, because I remember it having a pretty big presence in like one of PlayStation's like E3 events, where they had like the CEO walk out or whatever, and there's like a little dancing Crash shadow following behind him and stuff. So I really thought, like, yeah, it seems like at the time I thought maybe even Sony is partially funding this, and maybe that's why Activision's making it, because maybe it would have been, they would have thought it was too risky to do by themselves, but PlayStation's giving them money to make this exclusive for them, to recuperate if the game doesn't sell well. So I wanted it so bad, but I really didn't think we were going to get the Crash Insane Trilogy on Switch. But then lo and behold, like a year later, they announced it was coming. It came out almost, I think, like a day after the 1 year anniversary. So I guess they had like a 1 year exclusivity deal with PlayStation. But it was a really, really great, competent port of that game. They had to make a few cuts here and there, but on the whole, it still looked really great. And then Spyro, we got, the following year. It came out on PlayStation in 2018, and then we got it on Switch in 2019. Not quite as good of a port as the Crash one, which, Crash is kind of, you've got a fixed camera angle and everything going down these corridors, whereas Spyro is more open-ended. You've got this movable camera. So, there's kind of some frame rate issues kind of like Ukulele also had that problem where it was like the game would be running smooth, and then it would be like every so often it would just kind of like freeze for just like 1 second, and then it would go back to running smooth, and it was very jarring. Um, you would kind of get used to it after a while, and most of the game also had to be downloaded. Very little of it was actually on the cartridge. But still, though, to have that on Switch, because like growing up as a kid, Crash and Spyro were two of my favorite games. I dreamed of it so badly, but I don't know if I realistically would have actually thought that the original three games, like in the trilogy for Crash and for Spyro, that were PlayStation exclusive, would ever stop being PlayStation exclusive, and that I could play them in an official capacity on Nintendo hardware. That was just amazing. And then another one, Cuphead. Cuphead is one of my favorite games of all time now. I love that game so much, and I played it after it first came out. I thought the game looked so cool, but it was Microsoft exclusive, and it's funny. I actually got the game on PC because you could get it on either Xbox or on PC, and I don't have a PC controller because like I don't game on my PC usually, and I also couldn't figure out how to like sync my Switch Pro controller. So I downloaded Cuphead. It was very difficult. I played and beat the whole game using my keyboard, like pressing the arrows on the keyboard and then like dashing with like the shift key or whatever. It was so cumbersome, but man, I had so much fun with that game, even though at times it felt impossible the way I was playing it. I was actually kind of disappointed when when the game came to Switch because I got through the game so easily because like I had the muscle memory from playing it before, but now I actually had a proper controller that wasn't just like eh, eh. um but man, Cuphead, it's a top 10 favorite game of all time for me. And yeah, I just kind of like Sony with Crash Bandicoot, I just really thought like, well, Xbox, they're not going to put it on Switch as perfect as it would be. I don't really think they did anything with that in the marketing, but I remember thinking like, if the game did come to Switch, like it's perfect because the game's got two-player co-op and Cuphead's red, just like the one Joy-Con, and then Mugman's blue, like the other Joy-Con. I don't think they actually really did anything with that in any of like the advertising, which I think is kind of a missed opportunity. But yeah, it came out and it looked great on Switch. I think some people even said that it might have looked better on Switch than on other platforms. Um, Something about maybe like the color palette being more vibrant or something. The load times are worse on Switch. But on the whole, very little compromises. If the game gets a Switch 2 boost where you don't have to worry about the load times anymore, that'd be great. Um, but yeah, and it doesn't end there. There's so many more quote unquote impossible ports. A Hat in Time. I wanted to play A Hat in Time so badly since it came out on the PlayStation 4, I think in 2016. Because I didn't have a PlayStation, but I thought the game looked great. Um, but the developers, Gears for Breakfast, they very explicitly said, and I'm pretty sure they were even kind of rude about it when somebody asked, they were like, no, we are not putting this game on Switch. It's impossible. There's no way we'd be able to get it to run. We're not going to do it. Then lo and behold, they did it. And so I played it. I loved it. It's got a lot of frame rate issues too, so not the definitive way to play that game necessarily. At the time, it was all I had though, and I loved the heck out of it so much. Um, then we also had SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. This was one of my favorite games on the GameCube as a kid. I always wanted a remake. After the Crash and Spyro remakes, I thought, like, man, I could just picture in my mind just how beautiful it would look if Battle for Bikini Bottom got this same exact graphical overhaul. Um, and then they announced the Rehydrated, and it lived up perfectly to what I could have imagined. Now the Switch version, again, maybe not the definitive way to play it, because particularly in that first level, Jellyfish Fields, where there's a lot of like individually rendered blades of like I guess kelp or seaweed. It's not really grass. That there's a lot of pop in on the Switch version. But still, though, that was all I had at the time. I've since I've gotten a PS5, so now I can play those games on that. But it was so great just to have those games portably, though. Battle for Bikini Bottom, take it wherever I want. The game had some issues, particularly when it first came out. They had to patch some things here and there, to the point where now I think the game is in a really really good state. There's maybe a couple little glitches here and there and stuff, and purists might say, oh well, they did this wrong or that. But on the whole, I think it's really really good. Although I am remembering the Switch version did have a weird issue where with how the buttons were mapped, where you like jump with A, I think it was, and then attack with Y, which is very cumbersome because you're having to kind of like reach across with your thumb, whereas the buttons are right next to each other on all the other platforms. Because it's like X and square on PlayStation, I think. So that was kind of weird, but still though, just a really really great remake that lived up to everything that I could have wanted, and I never would have thought they would do it because it's like, well, Nickelodeon, for the last several years, had just been putting out all these really cheap generic licensed games where they'd give the developer like 2 weeks to make it and a budget of $5. you know but it was like, no, they're actually like giving this team like the budget and the time to do it, and it was great. So I was so happy with that. um Ty the Tasmanian Tiger, that's another childhood game that I really really loved as a kid. I love 3D platformers as a kid so much. Some of them were very obscure 3D platformers. Ty, I wouldn't say is like obscure, but it's kind of a B tier, kind of lesser known compared to like Mario and stuff. So it's just like, well, I don't know if there's enough demand for it. This game would probably never get brought to the Switch, but lo and behold, they did it. They put Ty the Tasmanian Tiger on Switch. I was so excited. I played it. I loved it. Um, Pac-Man World, one of the only Switch 2 remakes, ports, whatever, that I'm still waiting on is Pac-Man World 2, because that was my childhood. But they gave me the first one, and it was great, and I loved it, and I can only imagine that hopefully they're working on a second one, because they have to know, because people have been begging for it. Man, if they give me Pac-Man World Repack 2, uh, that would be so good. Another one of my favorite games of all time, but the first one, also really, really great. Katamari Damacy. It's funny, I had never heard of that game ever until I saw Peanut Butter Gamer play it in maybe like 2017 or something on YouTube. I was like, this game is so weird and quirky, but I love this. And I was like, I would really love to have this on like my Switch or something, because this just seems so fun. But from what I could tell, it didn't seem like that the sales were that great for the series, and I'd never heard of it until PBG played it. So I was like, well, this is really obscure, so that's probably not a very high priority for Namco. This is probably never going to get a modern version. And then like it was like months later from when I saw Peanut Butter Gamer play it. I was like, oh, I would love this, but it's never going to happen. Then a few months later, it's like, it's happening. Again, it's like I just was willing these things into existence. And then another one I've got on here, Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Didn't think we would get that. That was a game I didn't play back in the day on the Super Nintendo, but my brother used to talk about how he would, because he was older than me. Um, I'm not really much of a '90s kid. I was born in '99, but he would talk about how he would play that game with our cousin Josh back when they were kids, and how it was a lot of fun. So I remember us buying it on the Wii U Virtual Console, and we would play it, and it was really enjoyable. I really liked the game. Um, and then when the Switch came around, I thought like, well, they're just not going to do it because, for one thing, a lot of like legal reasons. Because I was like, well, I think like Disney had bought out like LucasArts, and I was like, well, does Disney even have an interest in that? But then beyond that, it was like, well, Nintendo's not doing a virtual console anymore, so it would have to be its own standalone eShop release, because like it's probably not going to come to like the Nintendo Switch Online thing. Um, but yeah, they ended up doing a Switch version of it, so that was awesome. So it was just like so many games, one after another, third party wise, that I just would never have expected. Well, I would have wanted desperately, but realistically didn't think that it would happen, and then it happened. Um, so yeah, that's just been really amazing to see. The Microsoft and Nintendo connection has been really amazing to see. Getting stuff. I'm not a big Minecraft fan, but having Minecraft on Switch, and then again Cuphead, and then also like Ori and the Blind Forest, and they've talked like that they're going to be. They've already said, like with Switch 2, during all that legal court stuff over, acquiring Activision, whether it was a monopoly, they've said that for like 10 years or something they would be, porting Call of Duty games to Switch. So the future's looking really bright with Nintendo and Microsoft. And like, who could have predicted that, back in 2012, we'll say, and then like all the rare games coming to NSO with like Banjo Kazooie and stuff. We'll probably eventually get like Conquer at some point. Um, it's just really great to see. But moving on from third parties, well, I guess I should say real quick, and now the door's opening with Sony because in the last Switch One Focus Direct, they announced like Patapon and Everybody's Golf would be coming to Switch, which are Sony owned IP, which is crazy. Before that, there was like the what was it, MLB The Show or whatever, but that kind of felt like Sony was having their hand forced a little bit because I think the MLB was going to look to partner with somebody else. Because they didn't want it to just be exclusive, but Sony was like, no, we'll still make them, but it's okay. You can put them on other platforms. I don't know if that's what got the ball rolling, but like, if Sony keeps this up, if they put, because this is another one of those impossible ports that I would never in a million years have thought would realistically happen, but now all of a sudden it seems possible that maybe I could get Jack and Daxter on my Switch, Sly Cooper, um, um, Ape Escape, like, oh my God. Oh. Oh. Oh yeah, there was also the Lego Horizon. I forgot about that one. Um, but yeah, Sony and Microsoft both went third party this gen. Like, huh? Last gen, everybody thought Nintendo was going to be the one to do it, so that was amazing. Um, Next up on my list here, I have ambitious series defining first party games. That's how I have it written. Um, yeah, there were so many Switch games this generation that got their definitive games. Again, I have my nostalgia for certain games, but if you take off those rose tinted glasses, I really think that a lot of these franchises have the best games that they've ever had on the Switch, like new original games. That's putting aside all the like ports and stuff. There's just like a lot of really good Switch exclusive first party Nintendo games that weren't originally on the Wii U or whatever. Um, I have never been a Pokemon fan ever in my life. I've tried to give it a chance, but it's just the games felt so linear and repetitive and tedious. You'd walk 2 feet and it's like you're battling Jimmy who's saying something nonsensical about shorts, and then you take more steps and now you're fighting little Johnny and he's got the exact same character model as little Jimmy, and it's like, um, and I would just keep the same Pokemon. Like, I'd always just keep my starter and, like, the same handful of Pokemon pretty much constantly be in my team the whole time because I never felt a need to change up my strategy. Just like hit the exact same attack button every single time. So, like, I was never a fan of Pokemon. I tried, but I just couldn't get into it. That is until Pokemon Legends Arceus, which I genuinely love. It is like one of my favorite Switch games. I adore Legends Arceus. It is so good. And yeah, I thought the game had a really cool art style, kind of like Breath of the Wild. I loved the open ended gameplay and how kind of like Breath of the Wild, they introduced sort of kind of like stealth elements to it, where it's like you could like tiptoe through the grass and you throw all these different Pokeballs. So there was a lot of like strategy involved, and the changes they made to the combat to make it feel a little bit extra strategy based. It was just so good. Even like the plot I thought was kind of engaging. Um, but yeah, that really, I don't know if it's fair to call me a Pokemon fan now or not, but I went back and I've bought a bunch of Pokemon amiibo. They're on my shelf now. Before, I didn't have enough connection to the franchise that I ever would have considered buying Pokemon amiibo. But I loved Legends Arceus so much that I got a bunch of them now. And then also another series that I had never been able to get into was Metroid. So Metroidvanias, I had this long history where I would play one and I would enjoy it quite a bit. I would get pretty invested. But then I would get to a point where I would just get lost, and like I'd be really stubborn and I wouldn't look up a guide because like I want to do it myself. I'll figure it out. I'm not gonna go online because then that's cheating. Um, so I would just wander around aimlessly for hours, and it would just get so tedious, and it'd be so much backtracking, and it's like I don't know what I'm doing. So I'd never beaten a Metroid game to that point. I'd never beaten a game in the Metroidvania genre at all up to that point. I'd played Hollow Knight, but I dropped it. I never finished it. I'd played. I think there's others, but yeah, I would always just get stuck and frustrated. But Metroid Dread came along, and again, just like Pokemon Legends Arceus, I think this is one of the best games on Switch. I loved Dread so much. I thought the Emmy were so cool. That was like my favorite part of the game. I think one of my previous coworkers when I used to work at Walmart, we talked about Dread, and he talked about not being a fan of the Emmy. But I was like, dude, that's like the best part of the game. So I don't know if other people feel that way. But I loved how it just constantly kept you on your toes. It was just really nerve wracking and scary. Um, but um, but yeah, the game, unlike Metroid Fusion, which is like very handholdy and linear and always points you in the right direction, the ways that Metroid Dread points you in the right direction are a lot more subtle. So I never felt like I was getting lost, but I also never felt like my hand was being held. It was just very natural. Like you would do something, and then it would like do something in the environment to block off this path where you can't go back that way anymore. So now you can only go forward. And it's like, okay, that's the game indirectly telling me, hey, you got this new ability. Don't go back trekking back this way, go this other way. Instead of having like Adam or whatever just point blank tell me. So that was really cool. But yeah, I loved Dread so much. Um, then you also had Breath of the Wild. Like talk about genre defining games. Like holy cow! Now I'm one of the people who I don't necessarily think Breath of the Wild is my favorite Zelda, but still, though, it really did usher in a new era of Nintendo and set a precedent for the whole Switch lifespan of Nintendo making these open world 3D experiences, which we'd never seen before, at least not to this extent. They would have sandbox games before, sure. And then during the Wii U era, that was a thing that really sucked during the Wii U, where it felt like Nintendo was being kind of tone deaf, where it was like every game was so linear. You know, you had a million 2D platformers, and some of them were really good, like Tropical Freeze, one of my favorite games. I love that game. Yoshi's Woolly World, another really great game. But it felt like that was all Nintendo was making on like the Wii U and the 3DS was just 2D platformers. And then when we get a new 3D Mario, it was just like super linear and like a fixed camera, and you could kind of rotate like a couple of different angles with the camera. It really wasn't until like the Switch with Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey where it was like, okay, Nintendo's being really ambitious here. They're going back to giving these open experiences with a rotatable camera. And part of the reason they didn't, I'm sure some of it might have had to have done with hardware limitations because the Wii U wasn't on the same level as like, the Xbox and PlayStation. And so there would have been, I guess, like serious compromises. But also, Nintendo just didn't want to because they had it in their minds that, they wanted to make their games as accessible for everybody. And they didn't want players to get bogged down and frustrated with, like, having to move a camera and, thought that'd be overwhelming or whatever. And I thought it was just crazy. It really frustrated me because, like, Nintendo they invented the 3D camera. That was, like, Lakitu's whole purpose in Mario 64 is he's literally the cameraman to kind of communicate to the player how it works, so they invented that like 20 years before, but then they got to this weird point in the Wii U era where they were like, nobody likes cameras, we got to make it where the camera is always in the same place. And then it wasn't until Minecraft, of all things, freaking chicken jockey for Nintendo to realize, oh, this game has a full 360-degree camera, and this game's super popular, and kids love it. So I guess, our audience isn't too stupid to know how to change a camera angle. So that I thought was kind of dumb reasoning that it took Minecraft, that it took Lava Chicken to convince them of that. But either way, though, they did it, with Breath of the Wild. Now, I'll be honest, I did get extremely burnt out on this whole world of, like, the Champion Link. Like, I got really burnt out on Breath of the Wild. I wasn't a big fan of the DLC. I wasn't a big fan of Tears of the Kingdom, which, yes, I'm one of those people who kind of feels like the game was glorified DLC. Sorry. I thought the underground stuff was very empty and vapid and kind of tedious to explore, and the Sky Islands a lot of them felt very copied and pasted, and just not a lot to discover. So yeah, I'm not. Sorry, my nose is trying to run. Um, I wasn't the biggest fan of that one, and I also don't really care for, like, we had Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, and now we're getting Age of Imprisonment. I'm just so done with this era of Zelda, and I'm ready to move on to something different. But that shouldn't take away from the fact that Breath of the Wild, when it first came out, was phenomenal. Um, so so yeah, just being able to climb anywhere, just all the different physics stuff and how you can interact with the environment. It was all just so cool and such a breath of fresh air for the franchise with the paraglider, fly anywhere you want. Just a big needed change of pace after Skyward Sword, which was just so linear and handholdy. I do hope that with the Switch 2, that because Nintendo said that with Tears of the Kingdom that they're done with that Champion Link era. I kind of hope that meant we wouldn't be getting another Warriors game in that setting, but whatever. So I really hope that whatever's next, goes for a different art style and a different setting and everything, and maybe gets rid of like the breakable weapons and some of the other stuff like that. But I do still want the open world nature to carry over. I want you to still be able to climb everything and to glide, because those elements are just so great. So yeah, Breath of the Wild. In retrospect, I have mixed feelings because I didn't necessarily love all the games that came afterward or the DLC, but that base game though was really something else. And so again, just another one of those genre-defining, series-defining games that just set such a precedent, and became such a inspiration for all these other companies with like Immortals Phoenix Rising and Genshin Impact and all these other games that just wouldn't have existed without Breath of the Wild. And then another, I've got Bowser's Fury on this list, which I also loved. I already talked a little bit about it, but just having a more or less fully open world Mario game was just really cool. I love how you could go back and revisit the islands later on, and they'd have new stuff, and then there's like the big colossal Bowser that would show up. Yeah, it was just really great. I was kind of disappointed with 3D World, and then also Mario Odyssey for different reasons, even though one of them is very linear and one of them's very open. But then Bowser's Fury was just that perfect thing that I'd been looking for. But then the last one I got down here, Pikmin 4. The most open-ended Pikmin game to date, with so much content, so much to do, so much to do, so much to see. But anyway, yeah, Pikmin 4. You had what, like, was it 5 different maps to explore? They were all so huge and open, and one of them was like inside of a house, like Chibi Robo or something. So that was just really cool. But so much content, because like a lot of Pikmin games, like Pikmin 1 and Pikmin 3, as much as I love them, the campaigns are pretty short. You can beat it in maybe like 5 hours and like get all the collectibles and everything. But maybe more than maybe 10 hours to get everything or something. I don't know, 7 8 hours. But to 100% Pikmin 4, it took me like 40 hours. There was a lot of content there, but it was so fun. There was so much to. There was like all these like NPCs you could talk to, which you've never really had before in a Pikmin game, because usually it's very isolated. It's just you on this alien planet with maybe a crew of like 1 or 2 other people. But yeah, having all these other like stranded, explorers and stuff that you had to help out, and all these little like Dandori challenges to do, all these collectibles to get. The game looked really great graphics wise. They brought back the caves from 2, but made them a lot less tedious to explore, with not as much like BS random crap happening that really just kind of screws you over. Like, a bunch of bombs drop from the sky for no reason and kill like all 100 of your Pikmin. But yeah, such a good game. I hesitate to say it's my favorite Pikmin game. Pikmin 3 was the first one I played, and so I still have that one's got a really special place in my heart. But if I'm being objective, it probably is the best Pikmin game, but I do think I may be like 3 better. But man, it was so good. So yeah, let's flip over to the back here. I've still got a full back page. We did all of one side. Next thing on the list, next item on the itinerary here, Nintendo Switch Online. Now, when this service first launched, it kind of sucked. I'm going to be honest. They had that January 2017 Nintendo presentation, and it was kind of upsetting that everybody thought that the Nintendo Switch would launch at like $250, but they're like, no, it's 300. So that was already upsetting. But then on top of that, they also announced, yeah, being able to play online is not going to be free anymore. You're going to have to pay $20 a year, which isn't a ton, but still, it's $20 a year more than we would be paying. And on top of that, it was like they didn't really fix the online from the Wii U, which kind of sucked. So it's like we're paying this money, but it's like you're not really investing into improving the online infrastructure. So why are we paying for this? And then on top of that, the only thing we have to play are these like kind of crappy NES games that don't hold up very well outside of like Mario 3 and Kirby's Adventure. Like, most of the games on the NES aren't really all that compelling to go back and play in the modern day. But then over time, they would add new platforms that would get announced in Nintendo Direct, and I would get so excited for these. So in 2019, I think it was in like September, I remember that being a really good Nintendo Direct. That was when they announced Super Nintendo games would come to the service, and so that you got Super Mario World and Super Mario Kart and Yoshi's Island and all these other really really great Donkey Kong Country. I don't think that was at launch. That one came a little bit later. But so that had me really excited. And at that point, it was like, okay, this is worth $20 a year. Genuinely, I think that the NES and the Super Nintendo games, because the Super Nintendo's got a lot of really good games that actually are worth playing to this day. And my brother and I grew up, with the Super Nintendo and playing like Mario Kart and Mario World together. But he's since moved out and has a wife and kids and stuff. But then that opened up the opportunity because with the Switch Online, you can play these games online. So like now, like me and my brother, we could play these games, from wherever we're at, and also just being able to take these games on the go and play them wherever, just opened up so many possibilities. But then beyond that, again at that point, I thought $20 a year, yeah, that's a steal for what you're getting. I wasn't complaining anymore, especially considering I don't know what they did, how they changed the infrastructure, but playing the Super Nintendo games online, I thought ran way better than trying to play the NES games online. Just like a lot less like latency issues and like lag and stuff. Um, then eventually, they announced Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. So you've got like Mario Land 2, the Zelda Oracle games. You've got all this other the Wario Land games. Well, so far it's only Wario Land 3. I don't know where Wario Land 1 and 2 are. Just all these other games. And so that, again, for just $20, I think that's fantastic value. I don't care what anybody says. And then on top of that, they came out with the expansion pass, which is $50 a year. So more than double the price. But with that, you get N64. Now with Switch 2, you're going to be getting GameCube, but we're talking about Switch 1. But yeah, like all the classic first three Mario Party games, you can play those online now. Mario Kart 64, you can play online, and take it on the go. So many other games, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Kirby 64. You had, oh gosh, I'm having a brain fart. Well, we already talked about Banjo Kazooie and like a bunch of other rare games that are coming to the platform now. Um, did I say Paper Mario? I probably did. I don't know. But, and then also, in addition to the Nintendo 64 app, then you got Game Boy Advance. And so you got Mario and Luigi, and you got all these other games. You got Metroid Zero Mission and Link, what the Zelda with the bird hat, the Minish Cap. So yeah, it was just so great. And like a lot of these games, I'm getting to play for the first time. I never played Minish Cap before it came to Switch Online. I'd never played the Zelda Oracle games. I'd never played Metroid Zero Mission. There was like a lot of gaps there in my first party Nintendo games. So having all that, it's just been so great. $50 a year for all of that, plus the games like Animal Crossing and Mario Kart getting like the DLC expansions that's free if you're subscribed to Switch Online. I just think that's an insane value. And I, at this point, am very happy paying $50 a year for it. And seemingly Nintendo's not raising the price for Switch 2, but they're adding GameCube games. And if it stays like that, then, like, yeah, I'm incredibly supportive of Nintendo Switch Online. And it's funny that, like, so many people complained whenever Nintendo first announced that they were doing away with the virtual console. Instead, it was going to be this NSO thing where it's this paid subscription service because people were really upset. Like, I want to actually own my games and everything. I remember distinctly back in like 2015, 16 ish through there, people were so sick of buying virtual console games again on every system. Is like, you mean I got to buy Super Mario Brothers, the NES game? I bought it on my Wii on the virtual console. Now I got to buy it on my Wii U and my 3DS. If Nintendo makes me buy Super Mario Brothers for a fourth time, I'm gonna lose my mind. They said, I wish Nintendo would just do a subscription service so it carries over and it's all there together like a Netflix style service, but for my retro games. Everybody was saying that, I swear, at least in the circles that I saw, like on like Nintendo Life and websites like that. Everybody wanted it. I was like one of the only people it felt like that was opposed to it. I was like, no, I want to be able to own these games. I like the virtual console. Then they introduced this Netflix style service that people were wanting, and everybody was so PO'd about it. But I actually ended up falling in love with it. So go figure. It would still be great if they had a free option for people to be able to get the games. Um, but yeah, it was so good. And some of the games that came to this platform, like I grew up as a kid with, my exposure to Super Mario Brothers 1, 2, and 3, and also the Lost Levels was on the SNES with Super Mario All Stars, where those games were remade with 16-bit graphics. And for Mario's 35th anniversary, they put that on the Super Nintendo app. I never would have expected that. I wanted it, but Nintendo re-releases that game so infrequently. They did it for like Mario's 25th anniversary or something on the Wii, and it was like a full price disc game, um, and not even like a thing where you could like download it on the virtual console. So I was so excited when that version of those games was coming to the Switch because it's like now I have an accessible way to play this. Because my Super Nintendo was like tore up, so unless I like modded something, I mean I guess I could have got the Wii version. I never did. But yeah, it was great. And again, that was another game me and my brother used to play. So to be able to play that online, plus they would come out with like all these, like I've got one right next to me for the Nintendo 64. These wireless controllers that are so cool. I've got a couple of the Super Nintendo ones, and I've got the NES ones. Uh, and hopefully I can get a GameCube one at some point. I didn't know when pre-orders were going live on the GameCube one, so I didn't get that initially in like the first wave. But that's okay because I do have a GameCube. I'm looking at it right now. A GameCube controller adapter that I can plug into my Switch that lets me use my wired GameCube controllers. So there's that at least. But yeah, so NSO has been another huge highlight for me throughout the Switch generation. Then I've also got on here listed. This kind of goes back to the impossible port thing, although some of these are games that never existed before. um, but I wanted so badly because like I love like cartoons. I'm a huge animation buff. I've got a bunch of like Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network figures on that shelf behind me there, and I distinctly remember wanting like, man, it would be so great to have like a Smash Brothers style like platform fighting game with like Nickelodeon characters. And then lo and behold, they announced Nickelodeon All Star Brawl. That was amazing. Another one of those things that felt like I just willed into existence because I don't know how many other people were asking for that. Um, Still waiting on one for Cartoon Network characters. I kind of willed that into existence with multiverses, but then that ended up, you know, yeah. But anyway, um, and just other like random obscure stuff. Like there was this application on 3DS called Colors 3D that I love to like make illustrations with, and you could do different layers. It was a pretty robust art program, and I really wanted something like that to come to Switch. And then lo and behold, they put Colors Live on the Switch, which is just that, a really competent drawing application that I really enjoyed for a while. I don't really use it anymore because now I've got like Adobe Creative Cloud, which is much better in terms of being a illustrating application. Um, but that was really cool. And then there was a lot of games that the Switch really opened up my horizons to want to try other game series and franchises that I never had really given a chance before. So like I'd never played Dragon Quest. I didn't know if it would be for me. But when Dragon Quest 11 came out, actually I remember back on PlayStation thinking the game looked really cool. Um, and then they announced it would be coming to Switch, and it would show up in like every single Nintendo Direct. It kind of got a little bit too much, I think. Um, Square Enix does that where they'll show the same game in like 3 or 4 consecutive Nintendo Directs, and sometimes with very long segments about it. And it's like, okay, I'm getting a little sick of this. Can we move on? But then, like maybe a month or so before the Switch version came out, they released an eShop demo of Dragon Quest XI that was like 10 hours long. It was massive, and I loved it. I thought it was so fun. I don't even think I finished the demo. I think at some point I put it down. I was like, okay, I don't want to play anymore because I've already made up my mind. I want to get the full version of the game when it comes out. So, yeah, when the full version came out, because it was a couple months later, so I'd forgotten some stuff. So I was like, yeah, I just want to wait for the full version, and then I'm going to delete this save progress and start all over from the beginning. So I don't want to get 10 hours into this. But it was such a good demo. So kudos to Square Enix for doing that, because I don't know anybody else who was doing that at that time, because it's kind of risky, because it's like, well, maybe people will play for 10 hours and say, you know what, I've had my fix. But no, they gave you a pretty massive portion of the game. And yeah, I loved Dragon Quest XI. I thought it was amazing. That game officially made me a Dragon Quest fan, and I went back and I started playing some of the older other ones. And yeah, it was just a really solid game. And then also Okami. I loved Okami. I didn't know if I would like it or not, but I saw it on sale on the eShop for like $5 or less. I was like, well, this is a steal. I might as well give it a shot. It is so good. It's kind of a Zelda clone, but if it were an actual Zelda game, it would probably be like my second favorite, maybe after Wind Waker. I really adored this game. Um, you play as a wolf, Amaterasu, so it's kind of like, Wolf Link. I think both games came out like the same year, if I'm not mistaken. But honestly, I love Twilight Princess, but I honestly think Okami's a little bit better than Twilight Princess, maybe even quite a bit better. Just so much variety. There's a lot of content. I think it took me probably about 40 hours to get through that whole campaign. And the game like faked me out like twice. Where like I thought the game was wrapping up. It's like, okay, this is the final boss. We're gonna beat this guy, then the game's over. But then I beat this boss, and then the game just keeps going. And then I get to this another point where it's like, okay, this is the end of the game. But then no, it just keeps going. And there's just so many different worlds to explore and so many different environments, and like, now I'm inside of this creature's body, and now I'm in, this snow environment, and now I'm in. There was just like so much. I think there might have been like I need to go back and replay Okami. It's been a hot minute, but I think there was like seems like there was maybe like a sunken ship that you explore that was really cool. I remember there's just like all these really cool environments. Super great game. Little Nightmares, like I said, that was another one. I think it was just like on sale really cheap, maybe for Black Friday. I downloaded it off the eShop, loved it. A lot of games like that. So yeah, that's another thing I wanted to be sure to mention here. Um, and then I wrote down a list of games as like honorable mentions. That's like mostly games that I don't really care that much about, but I figured are worth mentioning because they are big deals to a lot of people. Like I'm not a big Xenoblade fan, but the fact that you can play the definitive version of literally every single Xenoblade game, all 4 of them on Switch, that's amazing. And then like all their like DLC and everything. So Xenoblade fans have eaten really good this generation. I'm not into Fire Emblem either, really. But from what I've heard, Fire Emblem Three Houses is like one of the best Fire Emblem games. I know it won a lot of accolades and awards when it came out, so that's awesome. I've never played Advance Wars. I would like to, but I don't know. It's got very similar gameplay to Fire Emblem. But the fact that they did a remake of the first 2 games, that's amazing. I know people have wanted that long dormant franchise to come back for so long, so I think that's super awesome. Um, and some of these games haven't released yet, but like Professor Layton coming back, and just kind of Level 5 in general, that company that just kind of went off the radar for a long time, and now We're getting the new Fantasy Life just came out, and I've heard it's really, really great. I still haven't even played the 3DS Fantasy Life game. I bought it before the eShop shut down, and now this sequel's out. um, but um, but yeah, I want to give those games a chance at some point. Uh, Metal Gear, you've got I think the first three Metal Gear Solid games on the Switch, and I think like the NES one also in that collection. You've got like Dark Souls. You've got the Grand Theft Auto trilogy. We never got Grand Theft Auto 5, which is weird. And I know the trilogy was really not good when it came out, but I think they've maybe since updated it and made it more competent. Then you've got Bayonetta. I don't really play mature games, but that's really cool that you've got the first two, and then also the third one, and then there was also that like spinoff that they did. So you've got all this Bayonetta stuff. Bayonetta fans eating good on Switch. Then you've got your free to play games like Overwatch and Fortnite. I was I'd always wanted to give Overwatch a try, so I was excited when that was announced to come to the Switch. But then it came, and I played it a time or two. I was like, yeah, okay. So I never really got that into Overwatch. One of them though that probably should have been on my list of miracle ports, but like Fall Guys, I thought Fall Guys looked so much fun because I love 3D platformers, and it's like, you mean you made a 3D platformer that's like a battle royale, like Fortnite or something? That's amazing. So I was really stoked when that came to Switch. I had a lot of fun playing Fall Guys. And then you got like Mortal Kombat. From what I understand, again, I don't play Mortal Kombat, but I think the Mortal Kombat 1 game or whatever was like really, really bad on Switch, but Mortal Kombat 11 was, I think, a pretty competent port. Um, Also on this list, Animal Crossing New Horizons. For a lot of people, that's probably their definitive Animal Crossing game. I'm not super in Animal Crossing, but I know it was a massive success, and especially with the time that it came out, during COVID and everything. Just kind of became a real phenomenon for a while, so I had to at least mention Animal Crossing here. And then some games that aren't out yet, so I can't attest to their quality yet, but are very exciting because people have been asking forever for a new Rhythm Heaven and a new Tomodachi Life, and we're getting both of those. Then you also had stuff like Bioshock, Borderlands on Switch, Monster Hunter. Was it Monster Hunter Rise? Is that the one that came to Switch? Which I've heard was really good. Um, and then yeah, you also had two Splatoon games this generation. Splatoon 3 I thought was kind of redundant. I don't really feel like it needed to exist. But Splatoon 2 I was really invested into for a while. I put a good maybe like 70 or 80 hours into that game, which for me that's pretty good for an online game. I don't really play a whole lot of like competitive online games, but I was pretty into Splatoon 2 for a while. It resonated with me a lot more than the first one. Um, but uh, but yeah. One other category I skipped over on this list. Um, I've got on here Sega Renaissance. I've never been the biggest fan of like Sega or like their mascot, their flagship franchise, Sonic the Hedgehog. I'd always played Sonic games, but it was always kind of the crappy ones. Like probably my first Sonic game I think was actually Sonic and the Secret Rings. And then after that was the Wii version of Sonic Unleashed. Neither of those games did I ever finish, by the way, because I was like 6 or 7, and usually when you're that age, you kind of just enjoy like whatever, like kids can find entertainment with like a stick. They'll figure out how to turn into a magic wand or something. But even as a kid, I was like, nah, these aren't that good. Those were like two of the first games I ever sold as a child. I traded them in at GameStop. And then, which I know Unleashed has its fans. And then like I played, what other Sonic? I had like the Sonic collection of like the Genesis games on my DS, and I thought those were pretty good. I enjoyed those. Um, what else Sonic did I play? I don't know. And then like during the Wii U era, they came out with like the Sonic Boom stuff and all that, and Sonic Forces, which was a Switch game, but it just felt like Sega was just scraping the bottom of the barrel, and they were just putting out all these like lazy cash grab Sonic games, and then that really kind of started hurting their bottom line. The games weren't selling well. Then Sega, I guess, was like, well, maybe we should actually start putting some quality into these. Um, but yeah, I'd always wanted to play Sonic Generations. I didn't have the 3DS one, but at least the console version, because it skipped the Wii and only came to like Xbox and PlayStation, which I didn't have. So I was so excited when they announced Sonic and Shadow Generations was coming to the Switch. I really enjoyed that, especially the Shadow campaign, which in a lot of ways was kind of like Bowser's Fury. Um, and then I also really enjoyed, of course, Sonic Mania. I thought was a really good game. Sonic Color. I missed out on that one. I had a Wii, but I never had Sonic Colors. So to finally get to play that, I know people had problems with Sonic Colors Ultimate, but I never ran into like any of those game breaking glitches. I think the game soft locked on me once, but other than that, I didn't really have a whole lot of issues with it. I thought it was pretty fun, and Sonic Superstars I thought was pretty good. I thought the final level and boss was kind of bullcrap. I got stuck on that final boss for like I think an hour. I don't even know if that was the true final boss. I don't think I got like all the Chaos Emeralds, but I enjoyed that game. And then Sonic Frontiers, this ambitious open zone quote unquote Sonic game. It might have looked a little bit rough around the edges on Switch, but performance wise, frame rate and everything, pretty good. Um, I really enjoyed Sonic Frontiers a lot. Um, so yeah, and then on top of the Sonic game, so this was the generation like I was not a fan of Sonic. I would have probably hurt a lot of people's feelings before the Switch in saying that I think Sonic is just a very mediocre franchise with just a lot of crappy games that people eat up, and I don't know why. But I get it now. The Switch generation made me a Sonic fan because Sega actually put out some pretty competent Sonic games. And yeah, I'd love if they remake like the adventure games. I've never played those, but I know people really love the adventure games. I've seen some gameplay. I've seen a playthrough of Adventure One and some of Adventure Two. I don't know if I really think Adventure Two looks that good. Like the Knuckles levels seem really tedious and not very fun. But Sonic Adventure One anyway. I'd love to see that get ported, or better yet, a remake. Maybe on Switch Two or something. But beyond Sonic, Sega also brought back Monkey Ball in a really big way. They remade Banana Blitz, which I think is not considered a very good one. I thought it was okay. But then they did Banana Mania, which was like kind of a compilation of the first two games. And I'd always really, really wanted to play Monkey Ball and thought it seemed like so much fun. So I was really excited when that came to Switch. I was a little bit underwhelmed, honestly, with Banana Mania. But then they had a brand new one. Was it Banana Rumble? And that one, I absolutely adored that one. That one was everything that I wanted Banana Mania to be, but it was actually like an original new one. Um, so yeah, that was really great. And then on top of that, they brought back Samba de Amigo, and they've already announced that they're bringing back like Crazy Taxi, and I want to say, did they announce they're bringing back? Was it Jet Set Radio and like a bunch of these other like older franchises from like the Sega Dreamcast and stuff. I always wanted to play Nights into Dreams. I never played it, but that game, I always thought the character looked pretty interesting. So I'd kind of like to see them do that next as well. But then they're doing, I think, like Shinobi and a bunch of other stuff. So it's really cool to see this like Sega renaissance this generation. Um, but yeah, that's more or less my list. But yeah, again, just the Wii U and to a lesser extent 3DS. Just Nintendo just dropped the ball constantly. You had games like Chibi Robo Ziplash. You had just like all these games that took a beloved franchise and just neutered it, just cut its scrotum right off. Pardon my my anatomy, but yeah, and again, third parties too. Like Pac-Man, they were making those Ghostly Adventures games that were based on the show, where Pac-Man had this really unappealing redesign with like individual teeth, and he had like fingers and just irises, and it looked so wrong. Um, and then Activision back in like the um, mid to late 2000s, after they had acquired the rights to Crash Bandicoot, they massacred my boy and Spyro. And Crash, they gave him all these tribal tattoos and made him real weird and extra dopey. And he's like talking like Taz the Tasmanian Tiger, and completely changing the gameplay and making it like a beat 'em up instead of a traditional platformer. Just felt like a generic beat 'em up. Crash of the Titans and Mind Over Mutant. I'd kind of like to go back and play those games now in retrospect and see how I feel. But as a kid, kind of like with um, Sonic and the Secret Rings. I remember selling those games as a kid, um, and the Spyro game, the Legend of Spyro games. I wasn't really into those either. With like the you know one hit combo, uh, beat 'em up gameplay, and they had weird redesigns, just completely changing the direction of those franchises. But during this era, I know that's not really necessarily thanks to the Switch, but it all kind of happened in this same time period. That Crash and Spyro and Pac-Man and all these franchises went back to their roots and became great again. And we've kind of seen that with other franchises. With Mega Man got Mega Man 11, which was a really good game, and then they've put all these compilations of all these other Mega Man games on Switch. So hopefully Capcom has long term plans. Maybe remake. What is it? Mega Man Legends 1 and 2. I think are the 3D ones. I've never played them, but I'd love to. And then also there was like the canceled Legends 3 that I think was supposed to be on like 3DS. Maybe they'll bring that back. Who knows? But yeah, during the Switch generation, Mega Man came back from the dead. We already said Crash, Spyro, and Pac-Man. Bomberman came back from the dead. That was a launch title for the Switch. And yeah, so many other franchises. Rayman seems to be coming back from the dead. Um, excuse me. At least if Ubisoft doesn't cancel it, like they have a lot of other games in recent years. But they've said that they're bringing back Rayman, so time will tell, but I really hope so. At the very least, he did get to come back in Mario plus Rabbids, which I guess that's another series I didn't think to talk about. I never finished the first one, and then I never played Sparks of Hope. I'm not super into like grid-based combat. Sparks of Hope though looks really good from what I've seen of it, so I really want to play that game. But I always kind of intended to I'll beat the first one first, and then I'll play it. But as of now, that hasn't happened. But I think I did buy the Rayman DLC despite never playing it, just because I want to support Rayman. Um, but yeah, there was just so much good that's come from this generation, and so I'm excited for what the future holds. We got these great remakes, and then the developers of those great remakes have went on to make whole new games in these franchises. We got Crash Bandicoot 4. Seemingly, Toys for Bob is probably working on a Spyro 4 with Toys for Bob. SpongeBob, we had the Cosmic Shake, which admittedly I didn't love that game, but it was, it was okay, and I'm curious to see what Purple Imp Studios does next, because they've already kind of teased the next SpongeBob game they're working on, which is like kind of some sort of a Flying Dutchman themed like spooky game, I guess. Because Patrick's like a ghost in it. They showed like a little, very short teaser trailer. I don't even know how many people have seen this or knows that it exists. That was several months ago. I don't know what's happened to that now. Tomb Raider, that's another series that came back. They got a remake of the first 3 games on Switch. Freaking Croc and Gex and Bubsy are all coming back, and Glover. So I just genuinely, I said it before, but I'll say it again. I really think that this generation of gaming has been the best time to be a gamer. If you just take off the nostalgia goggles and just look at it objectively. Again, like people say all this about microtransactions and crap, but there's so many games that don't have that in there. They're just so good. So I'm excited for what the future holds. Not even just for Nintendo, but for like Sony. I think that sent a positive message. You had the Concord flop. But then Astrobot doing really well, so I hope they'll make more games like that. Make a new Jack and Daxter game. Make a new Sly Cooper game. Make a new Sackboy game. I don't know why they delisted the Little Big Planet games from their store. That's really weird. Hopefully they have plans to do something with that and not just shelf it forever. But we'll see. And then Ape Escape. So I don't know, but I think the future looks pretty bright. Hopefully. I say that, but then at the same time it's like, well, the Switch 2 is going to be coming out, and it's got, the games, some of them are going to be $80 and all that other stuff, and, we're not going to get into everything here, but, even if the Switch 2 generation ends up not living up to the Switch 1, which was just such a lightning in a bottle, I'm just so thankful that this generation existed, and I'm thankful that the Switch 2 is backwards compatible. So all this massive library of all these great, fantastic games are going to carry over. And nostalgia is a powerful thing. I talk about nostalgia and yada yada, but I mean, to be fair, a lot of the games that I'm praising the Switch for are remakes of games that I loved as a kid. But still, I think the Switch version is the definitive way to play a lot of these games, and I don't need to dig out a PS2 or a Super Nintendo or whatever to play these games anymore. They're just right there on the Switch. I think is great, and yeah, Crash Team Racing. That's another game that came out this generation that I neglected to mention. That game was a lot of fun during the time that I was burnt out on all the same Mario Kart 8 Deluxe tracks. I sunk well over 100 hours into Crash Team Racing, and they had like new they'd like have a new track and new characters every month, so that was really really cool. I kind of hate how that game had microtransactions in addition to like the fact that you're paying full retail price for the game. It was $40, so it wasn't as much as Mario Kart, but still, if you wanted to buy all the cosmetics, it's untelling how many hundreds of dollars you'd be sinking. But that game was a lot of fun. And then they stopped supporting that game, and then I got tired of it. But then that's when they had the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe DLC, and when they stopped supporting Smash Brothers Ultimate, that's when they came out with Nick All Star Brawl. And so it's just been a constant stream of just fantastic games to play. Yeah, very consistently, pretty much every month, Nintendo would coming out with a new game. There'd be a couple of lulls here and there. 2018, there was a pretty significant drought, at least in terms of first party games. Third parties delivered in 2018, but from Nintendo, it was mostly ports of like Tropical Freeze and like Captain Toad and stuff like that. And then you also had in there, Mario Tennis Aces, which came out in a kind of mixed reception. And then Kirby, what was the Kirby game that came out? Kirby Star Allies, which had mixed reception. Oh, when I was talking about genre-defining games, I forgot to mention Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which was this ambitious, the very first ever 3D platforming Kirby game, which was really, really good. I wouldn't say it's my favorite Kirby game, but it was really great, though. Really interesting, just the places they went with, like, the lore and some of the, just, like, the characters and bosses and stuff I didn't expect to see. Just a really, really cool game with great cutscenes, and there's like a little bit of voice acting and like a song with lyrics in the game, and just it really felt like a kind of a AAA budget Kirby game, which was really interesting to see. Um, but yeah, I think that's just about it. The last thing I had on this list is I wrote down like some of my favorite Nintendo Directs that I wanted to shout out. So I already mentioned in June of 2023 we had the one that had all the Mario games in it with like Mario versus Donkey Kong. I think it was that Direct that had that one, but I know for sure it had Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, and it had Princess Peach Showtime, and it had Super Mario Brothers Wonder and Super Mario RPG. It was just Mario out the wazoo, so that was awesome. And then I also really loved any direct where they announced a new platform for Switch Online. Was a big win for me, which that's several games. I think it was the September one when they announced in 2019 when they announced Super Nintendo games, and I think that's also where they announced Overwatch, and also that Smash Brothers was going to be getting a second wave of DLC, so that was very hype inducing. Fall of 2019 was just insane. Just so many games to play. Because during that time period, 2019, I think was my favorite year of Switch releases, if I'm being honest. I didn't even talk about Mario Maker 2. I forgot about that one. That came out in 2019. Mario Maker 2 was so good. A lot of people talk about it negatively, say the first one was better. I could not disagree more. I was so excited for the first Mario Maker, and it came out, and I played it for maybe 40 hours. I've put hundreds of hours into Mario Maker 2. The fact that they added everything that I would have wanted from the first one. They added extra bosses with like the Koopalings and with Boom Boom, so it's not just Bowser and Bowser Jr. And they added just all this extra stuff. They added new themes. That was something that really disappointed me with the first Mario Maker. The fact that I couldn't do like a desert themed level or a snow themed level. They added a bunch of extra themes like that. They added just all kinds of mechanics and power ups. Like they added like the frog suit to Mario 3, and they added so much stuff. They added the Mario 2 mushroom. The very first thing they revealed in the trailer was slopes, because like everybody wanted slopes so badly for whatever reason. It's cool to have them. I don't really know why that was the one feature everybody was wanting. But people complain about Mario Maker 2 because they got rid of the amiibo costumes. To me, I don't think that's the biggest loss ever. I'm kind of like, whatever. It would have been cool if they did more like they did where you could get like the Master Sword in Mario Maker 2 to get like the 8-bit Link costume, but it actually like had a full move set. I'd have loved to have seen that for like Kirby and Samus and some other characters, because it was kind of cool aesthetically. You could be like, oh, I made a Kirby level on the first Mario Maker, but like you couldn't float as Kirby or like inhale enemies and get their abilities or anything. You couldn't, shoot missiles as Samus. You could have the one of Sonic and make a Sonic level, but it's like, yeah, but you can't go through loop de loops. You can't rev up and shoot the ball. You can't, do any of that. Um, so I don't know. I don't think it was that huge of a loss that the amiibo costumes didn't carry over. And frankly, I really didn't have a problem, with the lack of a gamepad. I got pretty used to the controls. I think if you give it a little bit of time, I think you'll find that the controls are actually pretty intuitive. Um, so yeah, I never had a problem there. I think it's kind of a shame that Mario Maker 2 wasn't a bigger deal than it was when it came out in terms of people playing it and buying it and streaming it and stuff. So they also added like the multiplayer thing. Frankly, playing online against other people, if it's random people especially, the lag tends to make it like unplayable because of Nintendo's online. Hopefully they fix that with Switch too. But in concept, it sounds really cool. And the fact that you can play these levels together with people. They added the whole like world thing where you could string up to like 40 levels together on a world map with like 8 different worlds. That was so mind blowing. Mario Maker 2, I cannot sing that game's praises enough. I love it so much. Um, so yeah, that was just another really, really great, amazing thing that I almost forgot to talk about because I got sidetracked from talking about. I was going to talk about how 2019 was such a good year for Switch. Um, because yeah, you had that summer. You had I think so many hours that summer into Mario Maker 2 and into Crash Team Racing. 2019. That's also early that year when Cuphead came to Switch, which was amazing and mind blowing. And you had Yoshi's Crafted World, which was okay. It wasn't the best game ever, but it was all right. But then that fall, holy cow, that fall, SNES games came to Switch Online. A Hat in Time came to Switch. Um, Spyro Reignited Trilogy came to Switch. Luigi's Mansion 3 came to Switch. Zelda Link's Awakening came to Switch. Um, I know there was even more on top of that. I can't think now. But that was probably the busiest time as a gamer where I was just like, oh crap, I don't know how to make time for all these games. Like, there's just so much coming out. It's a good problem to have. First world problems. Plus, I was in college at the time and, taking a bunch of classes. But it must not have been a very packed semester because I feel like I was able to make time for a lot of these games. My first semester in college, I was taking like 17 credit hours and I felt like I had no time for anything. But every semester after that, I was taking closer to like, 14, 15 credit hours. And so I had a lot more time. But man, that was such a good period. Just so many great games to play. Like I said, 2018 was kind of a lull. There was Smash Brothers at the end of the year, and then there was the Octo expansion. But outside of that, it was a lot of ports and kind of mediocre games. Like we talked about the Kirby and we talked about the Mario Tennis. And then 2020 was another not very great year, but there was a whole pandemic, so you can't really fault Nintendo too much for that because who knows how things would have been if that hadn't happened. But other than that, like I think pretty much every other year's just been such a banger. 2021 later in that year, kind of the fall, winter of that year was another 2019 situation where there was just so much to play. There was like, I remember there was Nick All Star Brawl, there was Mario Party Superstars, there was Monkey Ball, Banana Mania, there was Metroid Dread. There was I think that was when the Colors Live came to Switch, which was that drawing app that back then I was really excited about, which a lot of people was like, "Who cares about that?" But it was a big deal to me at the time. Um, and then what else? 2021 was coming out, but that was a great Nintendo Direct. The E3 of 2021, where they announced Metroid Dread. They announced, all these other great games. That's when they announced the Monkey Ball that I was talking about, and Mario Party Superstars. But that's also where they announced Advance Wars 1+2. Um, yeah, there was. I feel like I'm probably forgetting a lot of stuff that was in that direct. Oh, WarioWare. We got the first new WarioWare game in however many years. That was really great. Honestly, I don't love WarioWare Get It Together or Move It, but like they're okay. They're good. But they're not my favorite WarioWare games. But still, though, that was a great Nintendo Direct. Um, I talked about the March 2018 one. Um, E3 2017, that was another really stellar one. We'll probably never get another one quite like that because I think that's when the Switch first came out and they really wanted it to be a big success and they didn't want a repeat of the Wii U situation. Nowadays, Nintendo plays their cards closer to their chest, but back then they were announcing a lot of stuff ahead of time that wasn't anywhere near close to coming out. But that year they announced Metroid Prime 4. They didn't have anything to show, but they announced that we would be getting the first home console Pokemon games. So that was a very big deal. In that E3, they announced the Breath of the Wild DLC. They showed off, they had this new trailer for Mario Odyssey that was really cool. That showed, the capture mechanic and stuff, and had the jump up superstar. I think that was when they first unveiled Mario plus Rabbids. Technically, it was in like the Ubisoft show, like a day or two before that, but then it showed up again there. It was all at the same E3 though. After the presentation, they announced a remake of Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, which is awesome. That's my favorite Mario and Luigi game. It was on 3DS, the remake, and not Switch, but I thought it looked great for a 3DS game. And they announced Metroid Samus Returns for 3DS as well during that presentation. What else? That's when they first announced Kirby. Um, what was it called? I'm having a brain fart. Kirby Star Allies, which again, I didn't end up liking that game in retrospect, but at the time I was so excited because Kirby's Return to Dreamland is my favorite Kirby game. So this was the first home like home console, mainline Kirby game since then. With like the 4-player co-op and everything. So I was really excited about it. That's when they announced Yoshi's Crafted World. There was so much at that E3. And then before that, you had the January 2017 presentation where they first announced Splatoon 2, which was awesome. I was really glad to see that wasn't just a port of the first game and that it actually was an original new game. And then also they announced ARMS and 1-2 Switch. 1-2 Switch, yeah. But ARMS, that was kind of cool to see a new IP from Nintendo. Didn't love it. I tried to give ARMS a chance. It didn't really super resonate with me, but I thought the character designs were cool. I really loved the look of the characters and stuff. Um, Honestly, I wish they would make ARMS amiibo. I'd buy all those. But that's when they first announced Mario Odyssey, and it was like, oh my god, Nintendo's listening to us. They're giving us this ambitious sandbox style 3D Mario that looks so good. Again, in retrospect, I maybe didn't love it, but still. And they announced, I think that's where they announced, no, they didn't announce Bayonetta 3 there, I don't think. I think that was maybe at the Game Awards, like later on, like that year or the next year. But they announced, was it Travis Touchdown was getting a new game, and they announced Fire Emblem Warriors. They announced a lot of stuff. Xenoblade 2. That was mind blowing. Again, I'm not a Xenoblade fan, but I know how long it took Xenoblade Chronicles X to come out on Wii U, and it kept getting delay after delay after delay. It was so many years showing up in so many presentations. I felt like it was never going to come out. To just a couple years after that, it was like, yeah, here's the next Xenoblade game. It's basically done. It's coming out at the end of this year, and it's not going to get delayed. So that was a pretty big deal. And they ended that January presentation with, to this day, I think the best trailer for any game I've ever seen. The Breath of the Wild trailer. That was just so good. It was so cinematic. showed off for the first time, because up to that point they hadn't shown a lot about like the towns and NPCs and stuff. It was mainly just Link on a horse in these open environments. So that was the first time we actually got to see all these races returning. So you had, that's where we got to see that the Zora were back, and that the that Gorons were back, and you saw a bunch of the voice acting, and the music in that trailer is just so good, and just like the shots of the like cutscenes and stuff, it was just it was the most perfect trailer I've ever seen. I don't know who Nintendo hired to put that trailer together, but holy cow! Honestly, I think that January 2017 trailer for Breath of the Wild is better than Breath of the Wild. Um, wow, what a trailer! Like, what a way to end it. But that was another really great presentation. Do you have any other ones wrote down? No, it looks like that's it. I'm sure there were others that were pretty decent. I feel like in 2023 there was a lot of really good presentations. I forget what the first one in that year was, um, but because the second one I think is when we got all those Mario games. Or maybe we got some of them in the first one and then some. I don't remember. But I do feel like it seems like 2023 I think had like three Nintendo Directs, and it seems like they were all bangers. I feel like Nintendo had a streak, whereas like they had some really really good Nintendo Directs back to back for a while, but I forget which what all was in them. But those were a handful of ones that stood out in my mind. So yeah, with that, that's pretty much everything I can think of. My voice is going out. So we're going to end this over 2-hour podcast reminiscing about all the great games that came to the Nintendo Switch 1, and we can only hope and pray that the Switch 2 will have a very bright future ahead. We already know some very exciting games coming out, between the new open world Mario Kart coming out here in just a few days, which is really exciting. And then also Donkey Kong Bonanza, and so the first 3D Donkey Kong game since the N64 one, which really a lot of people would say wasn't that good. So this is their chance to do it right, just like Kirby. So I'm excited for the future of Donkey Kong. We got the new Kirby Air Ride coming out, made by Sakurai himself, which I know my buddy Mr. Man 12, Michael McGonigal, who I interviewed on this channel. Go check that out if you haven't already. The creator of Baldi's Basics. I know he's very excited about that. So there's a lot to look forward to. Metroid Prime 4 is finally coming out. Pokemon Legends ZA. Next year, we've got the new Rhythm Heaven game. What is it? Rhythm Heaven Groove? Is that the name of it? I don't fully remember. And then the Tomodachi Life, Living the Dream. Both of those are coming out, and probably other games even that I'm forgetting about. But yeah, and then there's rumors that we'll be getting a Nintendo Direct this month, maybe within the next week or something. So that's really exciting too. Hopefully it doesn't happen. I'm about to go on vacation with my family to the beach, and if the Nintendo Direct is then while I'm at the beach, that's going to be really upsetting, because I want to be able to do a live reaction and stuff. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that doesn't happen. I guess maybe I could go completely radio silent and just ignore all internet coverage and react when I get back, but I think that's pretty far-fetched. I'm probably going to get spoiled. So yeah, hopefully it's not during any of those days. Hopefully it's this week and not next week at the time of recording. I'm recording this past midnight, so now it's June the 3rd. These podcasts take a long time to upload to YouTube. Hopefully it'll upload before the Switch 2 comes out, because I don't want this video to be dated that quickly. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed taking this trip down memory lane with me for the Switch 1, and hopefully the Switch 2 will, even if it can't quite live up to that lightning in a bottle magic of the first Switch, hopefully it can at least come decently close. But yeah, with that, that's going to be a wrap for this video, guys. So thank you so very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And I'll catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.